How you doing? Good to see you again. So this is the second out of 7 short series of videos about the Chronicles of Narnia, those majestic children's books from the pen of the great C.S. Lewis, that by means of a fictional world entitled Narnia point us to Jesus Christ and the grace of his gospel. They're beautiful stories to read. They're enjoyable in their own right, and they're to be read in their own right. And when we do so, and we allow what we understand from the scriptures to help us read what Lewis is saying, that then they point us beautifully to Jesus. Today we're on to the second book in the series in the chronology, although it was actually the first one that he wrote, and it's the most well known. It's entitled The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. The lion, of course, is Aslan. He is the character in the story that represents Jesus, and it's in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe that the really central event, I suppose you would say, happens. Namely, Aslan allows himself to die at the hands of the White Witch and the cruel hordes with her, and then he comes back triumphantly, and by his death and resurrection, others are rescued and saved. Indeed, Narnia is rescued and saved, and well, it's obvious, isn't it, where the parallel with the Lord Jesus is. One of the things I think about really great books, whether they're novels or books about history or books of theology or whatever else it might be, one of the really great things about them is that you can read them once and come back, and maybe come back a number of times, and yet each time that you read them, there's something fresh to be discovered. And of course the scriptures are in a league of their own when it comes to that. I've just read through the Narnia books in these recent weeks of lockdown. I don't know how many times I'd read them before, but I'm guessing at least 4 or 5. And yet, in reading through, this particular incident came home to me in a way that I'd never done so before. I must have read it several times, but I'd never really quite appreciated the spiritual significance of what was being said. So to set the scene, in the story, this comes before Aslan lays down his life, and one of the principal characters, a young boy named Edmund, he had acted treacherously, betrayed Aslan's cause and the welfare of his brother and sisters. Maybe didn't quite realise exactly what he was doing, but he got into league with the White Witch. He sort of persuaded himself that maybe she wasn't as bad as people said, although deep down he knew she was bad. He acted in what he thought was his own best interests, but it really proved not to be. And ultimately, of course, he would be rescued by Aslan's death and resurrection. But already he's been brought out of the White Witch's grasp by a party that Aslan sent to that end to prevent the witch from killing him. And so then the White Witch comes to speak to Aslan, and it's at that point, though nobody realises it, that Aslan agrees with her that he will die in Edmund's place. She thinks that's her great triumph. She doesn't realise that he's going to overcome death and overcome her in the process. When she comes to meet with Aslan, and Edmund and his brother and sisters and others are there, she comes in bringing her accusations about Edmund. Listen to this. "You have a traitor there, Aslan," said the witch. Of course, everyone present knew she meant Edmund. But Edmund had got past thinking about himself after all he'd been through, and after the talk he'd had that morning. He just went on looking at Aslan. It didn't seem to matter what the witch said. Isn't there something hugely helpful for Christian living there? All of us, I would imagine, who are seeking to follow Jesus are familiar with the phenomenon whereby, while we maybe even don't often recognise his hand in it, the devil does the work of accusing us. And former sins are brought to mind, and we beat ourselves up, and we think how terrible and how bad we are. And yes, of course, we want to be realistic about our sin, and we want to honestly confess and turn from it. But we shouldn't allow ourselves to be held captive by the thought of something that actually Christ has already paid for and set us free from and redeemed us from and made satisfaction for. How telling it is that Edmund doesn't listen to the accusations the witch brings. He just goes on looking at Aslan. What should I do, and what should you do when the guilt of former sin surfaces again? Well, if we never turn from it, of course we need to turn from it. But when it's a case of feeling guilty about something long since past and repented of, when it's a case of being beaten up about something that actually God has already forgiven us for, well, let's not listen to the enemy's accusations. Let's just go on looking at Jesus, who died in our place, paid our penalty, who set us free. Let us fix our eyes upon Jesus. God bless you.